Welcome to the ManTFup podcast here in the Man Cave. I'm Kimmy B.
And Lenny.
And we have an incredible guest with us today, Kendra Geronimo, yes?
Yes.
Look at that, I said the name right. Kendra, before we go any further, I do have to just handle some business. Remember, folks, like, subscribe. Wow. Like, subscribe, share, and follow. We are absolutely any and everywhere that you can find a podcast, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Apple, iHeart, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Pandora. The list goes on and on.
We're all over.
Yeah, just at ManTFup TV, the ManTFup podcast. And with that being said, let's get into this conversation because I'm really excited to have you with us today, Kendra. Thank you so much. You are like the epitome of what it is to ManTFup.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, so you have this incredible backstory. I've been talking to Lenny about you for a while. We got a random DM on the radio show one morning, and it was a flyer for this screening for a movie, and it was called, what is it? Surviving Sex Trafficking. And, you know, over the, I want to say the last few years, but definitely since 2020 when the Super Bowl was here, and I know even the Super Bowl prior to that, we've started to hear more about sex trafficking, and specifically as it relates to South Florida, because we are one of the, I want to say, worst cities or areas in the nation. Yes.
Yes.
And there's quite a few actually in Florida that make the top 10 list in the United States. I want to say Orlando's another one, Tampa,
and then here
Miami, right?
Yeah.
So I know we've kind of created a little task force, at least when there are major events coming to South Florida, and the folks get out there and they try to raise awareness and they try to, hammer home the fact that this is a time when you're going to see lots of beautiful people, women in particular, in our city, and it may look like they're here for work or for entertainment or just to hang out. And unfortunately, there is a much more sinister thing happening behind the scenes. And a lot of them are brought in, they're trafficked in, and they're here to do, forced sexual labor and other things. And, I think it takes people a minute to wrap their brain around that, and we're all, it's a buzzword for a few months and then we kind of forget about it and we move on, right? But that statistic about Miami being at the top of the list as far as cities where sex trafficking is extremely prevalent doesn't change just because the Super Bowl is not here or some music award, show isn't here, or it's not Art Basel or whatever the case may be. And the movie that we got the flyer about, you happen to be in, because you, in fact, are a survivor of sex trafficking, yes?
Yes. Real quick, going back to where you were talking about the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So the Super Bowl wasn't here before, so it wasn't as bad. But everybody who had been in Georgia, you know, with the Super Bowl there, they had set up all these parties. They were used to frequently going there, and some of them may not have even been to Miami, but now you move the Super Bowl over to Miami, and they're like, okay, well, this is, a prime environment for it. So that's why Miami kind of bump their numbers up with so much sex trafficking going on here. And that task force, Ashley Moody, the state attorney general, she runs the task force for all of Florida.
Got you.
And then they break it down into specific areas in certain areas. So the areas like Orlando, Tampa, here in Miami have gotten really, really bad since the Super Bowl has gotten here, because now they came here, they found a new area and set up, and now we have that traffic here that we didn't have before.
Wow. So the Super Bowl was actually a catalyst.
Yes.
That's scary.
Well, we do have, probably 24/7 clientele more than you have in other areas, because even when the Super Bowl's not here, there's hundreds of thousands of tourists here.
Yeah, I was going to say, it feels like it's a transient city to begin with, right? There's lots of people that come in and out of town, might be here for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and they go back to wherever they're from. So seeing new faces, even in your buildings. And I guess part of the reason why we're having this conversation, obviously, Kendra, we want you to share your particular story, but it's also to bring to light that trafficking can literally be happening right underneath your nose, on your block, in your neighborhood, in your school, on your college campus, and you can be completely unaware and oblivious, to the fact that it's happening. You may know somebody who is actually living a trafficked life and they're too fearful to come forward and say anything, but they're interacting with people, right? Would you agree that we have a misconception about what sex trafficking is or human trafficking is in general.
Not just a misconception, but a belief that it can't reach them, that you know they're above that because that's, you know, associated with poverty or, you know, troubled individuals or anybody who has, you know, I have myself together, I live in a good neighborhood, you know, I have an HOA and I you know, so they think that that it's like that crime can't touch them. So informing them of this, like I said, it changes their view a little bit, and it starts to kind of like sink into their subconscious that it could be possible.
Well, I think before I had the opportunity to meet different people and that work in this, you know, as far as on the nonprofit side, really trying to help people get back into mainstream society after having survived something like this. You don't realize that the bias that I had was it was people from other places being trafficked here, right? Like you always think about the Eastern Bloc, Eastern Europeans, whether it's because we see it in movies or you think about people from Southeast Asia. You know, again, to Kendra's point, we think about people who are in poverty who possibly have no other option.
Asian massage.
From African countries, you know, they're trying to get citizenship. They're trying to get out. They're trying to get their family out. You do what you need to do in order to, you know, either get the funds or just to get out of your situation. But there are plenty of American people that are trafficked on a daily basis, like
all different reasons.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I liked about the documentary was that like literally all of us were from different aspects and different walks of life, and we were, you know, taken into this world or groomed into this world for very different reasons. And the way the movie kind of cuts everybody's part in, I didn't see that part until after it was out. But it's like there's 5 of us that are literally from all across the world, and they spliced each part of it where we were talking about the same thing. It was like we each had the same feeling, but literally we were in it for different reasons. So I really loved that because it showed like, you know, just because it wasn't the same story doesn't mean we don't deal with the same issues during and after. So it kind of opens it up to it's not just this, it's all of this.
So with that being said, and you taking it back to the documentary, maybe you can share a little bit with the ManTFup family about your personal experience with sex trafficking, how you got there. We know that we're talking to a wide audience, but, you know, you're from South Florida, yes?
Yes.
And I know people have this idea of what Miami is, of what Fort Lauderdale is, right? And it's usually glitz and glamour, and it's expensive cars, and it's, you know, professional sports, and it's models, and we know, if you live here, that there's a very different side to our South Florida life, and that we also know that the disparity is wild, like, but there's not necessarily a this block and a that block. Like you can literally be in Coco Plum, which is, you know, a really bougie area in Coconut Grove, and then you have Grand Avenue, right, which is which almost looks like something you'd see anywhere in Jamaica once you get outside of the resort areas. So I mean, we have a bunch of different kind of moving pieces to what makes up life in South Florida. So just to kind of give people that understanding.
Well, actually, I didn't grow up in South Florida.
Okay.
I grew up in New Orleans.
Oh.
And then I moved to Orlando. So in Orlando, looking at Miami, I didn't know, you know, the bad parts of Miami. I only saw the glitz and glam, which was kind of what led to me getting taken. Someone was like, hey, let's go to Miami. And I was like, oh, that sounds really good and really interesting because I didn't know the other side of that. You know, so I didn't know that. But then also the person that took me wasn't from Miami either. He was from Chicago.
Got you. So do you mind sharing the story of how you met? Like, what were you doing in Orlando? How did you meet this individual?
So when we were talking earlier, you were like, sometimes, you know, people are timid, but sometimes they're overconfident. So that overconfidence leads to complacency and content. I'm good. You know, this is my area. And I was working in a club and I was approached by a pimp. And I said, you know, that's not for me. And I was so loud, and I was drinking really heavily at that time. So, you know, everything was over dramatic, over the top. You know, I kind of like voiced it very loud that was not for me. And he left immediately. And then, you know, over the couple of days, there was 2 customers that had come in, and they were hanging out all the time. And they were 2 girls. And they were like, yeah, we're going to Miami next year. You know, we're from Miami. This is great. This is cool. They were actually not from Miami. And they were like, well, do you want to go? And it was for New Year's, and I didn't have any plans. So I was like, okay, but I'm going to take my car. Because now I believe in my head, I know what, you know, situational awareness and self-defense is, and I'm independent, you know. So I'm going to go be this Miss Independent Woman, and I just took off to Miami. in reality, I really didn't tell anybody who I was going with. I didn't, you know, tell anybody where I was going. You know, I'm independent. I can do whatever I want. I don't have to check in with anybody.
How old were you?
18.
Okay.
So again, I'm independent. You know, I don't need to check in with anybody. I just took off. And I was drinking pretty heavily. So, you know, I had my first drink and it shouldn't have been an issue. But after my first drink, I blacked out. And then when I woke up, I was already in the moving van. And in the moving van, I kind of like, you know, getting your awareness and like feeling the car moving, feeling the tires going, hearing all the sounds. And then like when I looked up, I was laying in between the driver's seat and the passenger seat. And I looked up and I saw this guy that I had just told that I wasn't interested in, you know, pimping or anything that he had to offer. And he pulled his pistol out and he put it to my face and he said, "We're not going to have any problems, right?" So it's like in that moment, you're kind of psyche splits a little bit and then you're just quiet. You're like, no, you know, fight or flight. Like this is not the moment to fight. So let me just kind of get my bearings and figure out. And it was just that easy, you know, like one drink later and I'm in a van and I have no idea where I'm off to.
That is so fucking scary. So were you in Miami when this happened?
No, I was.
So
in
you hadn't made.
Orlando.
So okay. So literally, you're
Well,
at the
yeah,
club.
no.
You're making plans with these people.
No. So yeah, I was in Miami by that time.
Okay.
So in Orlando, I said I'm gonna take my own car. So they went. I followed. You know, we got
Okay,
to
yep.
Miami. We had a
Yep.
drink, and like I was outdoors. Like I still can't tell you how I got from standing up at the park wherever we were. I can't even remember. I know we were outside of some gas station, like a park area, and we were waiting for fireworks to go off, and that's it. So, like, how they got my unconscious body to anywhere else without anybody noticing, I still can't tell you that.
Well, you know, on holidays and stuff,
And
it's
in
not
Miami,
uncommon.
Well, no,
Yeah,
but
it's
we've
not
also-
uncommon
But
for
we've
people
also
to be
gotten
dragging
to a
their friends.
place where I know that, but you know what? I mean, and maybe this is a conversation for another time, but I was literally thinking about this in the aftermath of what happened in Uvalde, Texas. And we talk about warning signs and we talk about, you know, red flags and falling through the cracks. And you hear a situation like that and it's like, did somebody see? You know what I mean? And just say that's not my business. You know what I mean? Did somebody know who this dude was? Was he a Miami guy? Now, do you know that he was a Miami guy? Or
no, he was from Chicago.
Okay, so he was a Chicago dude, so he didn't really have ties down here either.
No.
So it's like, you know what I mean? And it's where do you draw the line? And I understand staying out of grown folks' business to some degree, but it's like when you see, it's one of those situations. It happens all the time. People come for spring break. A young woman ended up dead in a hotel on South Beach last year, right? And all I could think when I was reporting the story was, where were her friends?
Where were her friends?
Where were your friends? Like, I don't understand, because I was I was the cock block. I was that person that when everybody got hammered at the end of the night, I was like, nah, let's go. Okay, come on. You like her, call her tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, here's our phone, like, whatever. Here's my page, like, whatever you want to do. But, like, if we came together, we're leaving together, unless it was your dude. Like, unless you've been with this person, we all know him. We know where he lives. Like, no, let's go. I went to Mardi Gras, New Orleans at 18 years old with no place to stay, like, with my best friend, like, with my roommate from college, and literally would start to sober up. As soon as the sun started going down, I would stop drinking, and I would grab her by her beads. And walk her through Bourbon Street like this. You know, we didn't show our tatis. Like we had all white beads because we were like the virginal. It was interesting. But I think about even now how stupid that was. Same thing. Like we went and didn't tell our parents where we were going. Road tripped it to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. At literally, my birthday was on February 9th. I turned 18 on February 9th. I'm at one of the biggest street parties on the planet where, you know,
Dangerous. It's very
super. And you come out of it and you're like, hey, and you tell the story later and people look at you like, are you
crazy?
stupid? Like we literally had no place to stay. I ran into a guy that I worked with at the pool at UM, lifeguard. And there were like 12 people staying in, you know, 2 hotel rooms, like whatever, all college people. We knew everybody. So we ended up with a place to stay, but like just dumb shit. We do dumb things and we just have to get better at not doing dumb things. But to your point, you know, you thought you had it under control.
Yeah. And speaking about what you were saying, like I've worked security so much at clubs that, you know, I see guys start to carry these girls out and like I've had incidents where I'm like fact checking them.
Yeah.
They don't know her name, Her friends aren't anywhere around. Oh, I just met her. I was helping her out. Put her down. Don't worry about it. I got her. You know, and then the next day, the person will text me, hey, I'm so glad you got me home. I really appreciate it. And I'm thinking the same thing. Like, where are your friends? Like, the girl I'm specifically speaking about came with friends. And then that's it. Like, I found other girls, like, drunk sitting on the toilet and there's nobody with them. And then I think to myself, were you drugged and you just didn't make it back out to that guy that wanted to take you?
Yeah.
Like, you know how lucky you could have been? Like,
Even in your situation, though, you had 2 females that, did they set you up?
Yeah.
So here you are, like, girl power. Who needs friends when you got, who needs enemies when you got friends like that? Like, and that's scary to me. And I don't think that always, again, there's so many different ways that this happens, right? But at the end of the day, the main point is it happens, and it can happen to absolutely anybody.
Yeah,
and
but they think it's this big, scary person.
Well, yeah,
guy. They don't realize it could be the 2 girls that just befriended you.
And I think that that's what we were discussing before we started rolling, was that, we have this very Hollywood idea of what trafficking looks like, especially when it comes to women and especially when it comes to sex trafficking, right? It's the movie Taken. It's Liam Neeson, and, I have a very specific skill set. Like, that's what we all think. But at the end of the day, there ain't no Liam Neeson coming to get you.
No.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the other scary part about it.
What's his name? The one that lived in Palm Beach.
You're talking about Epstein.
Yeah. I mean, look at this. It's like, it's straight up.
But that was, in a lot of those situations, those young women were ending up at his house because of friends from school that were getting paid.
Did you hear what he called it, though? What did he call it? A pyramid scheme. I wanted to throw up. No, sir. What you did was groom those young ladies to go out and acquire other young women to bring back to you for sex. That's sex trafficking. And everyone's like, oh, but it was the girls who were doing it. Okay, but there's a thing called grooming. There's a thing where if your friend has already been groomed, now you're already halfway groomed because that's your friend, you trust them. If they say you're making money and you may or may not have to do this, then they're like 3/4 of the way groomed. Like, it's a mental game that's like, it's really sadistic.
100%. But again, I think that goes back to what we were talking about, though, when what makes this such a hard thing for people to wrap their minds around is that it's exactly that. There's so many pieces along the way, right? Like, when you think about it, it takes a lot to get to this point. But placing the blame at the end of the day has to fall on the person who's orchestrating it, right? Because you don't know why did those 2 girls help that individual, right? Are they horrible people? Yes, they are. But what happened? How did they end up in that situation? Because something tells me it was probably 2 other girls in another city that convinced them to go somewhere. Do you understand? So it's like,
or what he told them before.
Yeah.
Go get her, or when you come home, it's you.
Yeah.
Then you're in that fight or fight and survival mode, and like, I'm pretty sure these girls didn't mean to do this, or other girls didn't mean to do this, and it's that subconscious fear, that maybe he has or hasn't hit them, but that's what they're saying, that's what they're doing. A lot of people be like, well, why don't you just run off? Because he has your ID and he's threatening to kill your family back home. So there's an invisible hold because people who aren't in that situation, never been in that situation, don't understand it. Why didn't you just leave? Like, as if it was that easy.
Yeah, and it's I think this goes to almost the level of like brainwashing. It's like, it's almost like a military type of thing. I mean, these guys go to boot camp and they're in boot camp for 6 weeks and they come out and they
indoctrinated.
They could kill somebody and not, without even thinking about it. And it goes to that same level of, brainwashing for these girls. And those girls that enticed you, I'm sure they were, already well indoctrinated into that thing. I'm sure there's, you watch the movie, was it Natural Born Killers? You watch that movie and I'm sure there's some whacked out women out there that are just, all about this, and them and their man are, that's what they do for a living. But then I would bet most of these girls are coaxed and taught.
But this also isn't like, I don't want
Trained.
to say it's not silence. This is a business to these people. These
Oh,
people
yeah.
that are doing this, they're in it for the financial gain, not obviously the women who are being trafficked. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the men that are putting this together. Like, it's a business. Like, it's a there billions of dollars are changing hands.
I think there's a little bit more of like a ego complex as well. You know, some of them do it for the financial gain, but then some of them enjoy that attention, that power, that masculine that they think that brings to them. You know, so it and there's definitely something mentally wrong with them. So, and then the other half, 100% is money.
It's just like,
I mean, you get your nails done at these nail places with all these Asian girls. If you ever really watch what goes on in there, there's a couple guys that pull up in a car and come in and collect the money.
The girls, so
that's all run. It's like
not all of them, Len. I know.
I said
people that
that's
own
all
them, I'm
run.
just
I didn't
saying.
say all of them. I said
Like,
that's all
I'm
run.
like, she's a boss. Like,
I'm just
my nail
saying
tech inch.
it's you know, it's the same level. These people are forced to do things
well, because
against
that's
their will.
the
I
other
mean,
part
the
of it.
Asian
Working.
massage places around here, they're all, you know.
So now we're talking about human trafficking and sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And then like you'll go even further and it'll be like domestic violence turns into sex trafficking. So these lines get blurred back and forth. That's why when I talk to cops about these situations, I'm like, just do your due diligence. Like every situation is not one-sided. Like you have to understand, why is this person doing this? Why won't she come forward? Why won't she come home? Where has he been? Follow the money trail, but do some investigating. You can't just superficially feel like, okay, so like I worked for a place, even though I want to say their name, I won't. And they used to call the girls, like over the radio when I worked security for them, they would call the prostitutes that come in late, what did they call them? Undesirables.
Oh, okay.
I lost my shit. I lost it completely. Like, I was like, are you serious? That is your policy code name to call these girls? So now when you're banning them, they don't see that there's somebody in there that they might be able to get or call for help. No, we're just banning them and having them arrested. Like, we're not even arresting them and doing due diligence to see. No, we're banning them because prostitutes bring bad, press to the establishment, or, they could, do something wrong to somebody else who goes there, and then they'll sue them. So that's how they're viewing it. I raised such an issue. They started calling them ladies of the night, and then arresting them and doing a little bit of due diligence. And that's all I'm asking. Like, you have no idea what they're going through, but yet you're just assuming that, they're undesirables. Like, and what is that? Like, you're training other people to look at them like.
Yeah. Which means if they do ever want to come forward or stuff, they already are behind the eight ball.
Yeah.
Well, I know watching Surviving Sex Trafficking, Kendra, that was one of the things that you pointed out, was that your experience with law enforcement when you came forward, like after you got away, was like horrifying. They may as well have done it to you themselves with the level of disrespect and like not believing and this really like questioning you and I mean, can you talk a little bit about that? Because you did come forward, you were trying to get this person put away, were you not?
Yeah. So as soon as I got back and free, and I went to the police station and just like waiting there, having to explain my story to every single person that, took my name, took my information. And I immediately, I was like, is there somebody I can speak to behind closed doors? And, just the impatience level, well, why? And then so I'm telling them, part of my story, and then they shut me off and they're like, okay, well, I'll go get somebody. And then I'm waiting forever, and then I'm asking. So all of that stuff, like, can you imagine like how you feel just getting away from the situation, being ashamed of what happened to you, being, scared and helpless and not having a home, not having anything. And then the cops treat you this way. And then I get back into this room with this cop who was just sitting back, like, like real casually, eating a sandwich, or he's eating something. I remembered because it annoyed me so bad. He chewed with his mouth open. And like it bothered me even more. And then he's like, so what's this guy's name? And I'm like, I don't really know. I know what his alias is. And he's like, you don't know his name? Well, he has my ID, but I didn't quite get his.
Yeah.
And he just kind of chuckles, and he's like, all right, so where did you say he took you from? And I was like, well, I came to Miami. He goes, oh, so willingly. And I'm like, okay. I went and I was drinking with some girls. Oh. And you met him. You already met him. It was in a club that you met him. And then you went to Miami with some girls that you didn't know were with him. you know. And it's just like I started to see the way he was painting the
Yeah.
picture, and I was like, hey, you know what, don't worry about this. And then he gave me problems about like trying to leave, like, oh well, I guess it wasn't that big of an issue, huh? And it's just like, those are the kind of things, like, and that was like 10-15 years ago, so it was like there wasn't a name for it. There wasn't, you know, where the shame was responsibility transferred over to the aggressor or the perpetrator. Now it was still on the woman and her cleanliness or her holiness or, you know, your ladylikeness or, you know, were you living a reckless life or, oh, you were drinking. So like a lot of those things, just why go to another police and do these things again, you know? Why go through that whole process all over
victim
again?
blaming.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, I mean, we see that all the time in abuse cases. And that, I think, is one of the most horrifying parts of all of this, and why we don't make more progress is because in certain cases, these are women in particular who have been blamed their whole life or have felt less than their whole life. Like, there's situations that led to these circumstances, right? Like, and so now you want them to come forward. Plus, many people don't trust law enforcement to begin with, especially depending on the circumstances prior to being trafficked.
You know, it's guilty till proven innocent, not innocent until proven guilty.
And not only that, but the process in which a survivor has to go. You know, the amount of times you have to tell your story to somebody, and then that burden of proof, which I'm actually friends with a lawyer who changed the level of burden for proof here because she was sexually assaulted. She decided to keep the baby, and then the man actually sued her for parental rights. So she actually changed the level of burden of proof of what you have to prove that you were assaulted to revoke parental rights and to prove that you were sexually trafficked or to prove that you were raped. Like, you don't have to go through such an extenuating process, just enough to prove that it did happen.
Yeah. Like, I'm sorry. I'm absolutely mind blown as you continue to talk, because it's just, there's so many layers to the situation. Like, the trauma that you experience laying on the floor of a van with a gun pointed to your head, not knowing where you're going. Then I can't imagine what you went through. How long were you with this person?
3 months.
So, okay. So for 3 months, did you know where you were?
Yeah, I knew each place that he brought us to because each place he made us work.
All around Miami?
Well, back from Miami, we went to Tampa, and then we went back to Miami, and then all the way across to South Carolina. And that was like in less than a week.
And where were you staying when you were in these places? Like,
so we either stayed in
houses?
hotels.
Okay.
And then when we went to South Carolina, he actually put down on a house there in a developing area in a nice gated community.
And that's where he had...
All of us, yes. We didn't have any furniture. There was just the clothes racks and like our bags and our bathroom stuff, and like all the windows were nailed shut, and the doors didn't have handles. They just had like a lock on the other side, and then the back door.
So he could lock you in.
Yes.
Shit is so fucking wild, bro. Like, and how'd you get up? How did you get away?
So for 3 months, it was kind of like a chess game. Like, I had seen him like severely beat some of the girls there. You know, I've caught my unlucky days where he wasn't like really in a good mood. Mm-hmm. And then like the more he realized that like if he left for half a day or something and I didn't run, you know, he got more trustful of me. And then he went away for the weekend. And the girl that he trusted the most kind of slipped up. She left my door unlocked, left her door unlocked, and left the keys kind of like right next to the little air mattress. And I had been planning and prepping and kind of getting my head aligned. Like, when it's go time, I'm out. And I saw everything aligned. I took the keys, I closed the door, and I bounced. I had already kind of prepped somebody in one of the clubs that he took us to. I was like, hey, look, you know, I know I don't know you, but, you know, this is the situation I'm in. And, like, the person was like, oh, you want me to, you know, cause an issue right now? And I'm like, no, because he has my ID. He says he'll kill my family, you know. And so I kind of was like, I just need to disappear and get back home. And then when I left, I had this person's card, which I actually still have to this day. I called the person up, and then they let me hide for 3 days because I already knew he was going to check bus stations, planes, trains, everything. So I hid out for 3 days, and then when I got off the bus in Orlando, I went straight to the police station. And we already know how that went.
And then you were just basically on your own, trying to stay away from this mad person, like literally. Did he get locked up?
So I never pursued filing charges on him. I kind of just wanted to disappear from him completely. And then, like, I had my issues with him after I got home. By the time I got home, he had already threatened all my family because he thought that I stole something from him also, which he ended up finding. And then, like, he didn't have any sense for aggression. I was already gone. But then he felt like he lost something. You know, he lost something of value to him.
Yeah.
So then it's like it kept going. And then, so by the time I was able to kind of, like, break away from that a little bit, you know, I didn't want to go back through a trial and subject my family to that because then, like, my family, again, back in the day, the shame was on us. So now my family is not bothered, but, you know, their lives are changed because this person's calling them, harassing them, threatening them, saying, and nobody knew where I was. Like, they put a missing persons report on me, but when they finally got through to my cell phone, they've been calling my phone, he took me out to the car and again put the gun to my head and said, make this go away. So in essence, kind of my family thought that I chose to be there. So then now you're making this choice in life and now it's bringing us this kind of grief. You know, they didn't fully believe that, but that's kind of how it appeared superficially. So then, like, to think after I finally got home and settled all this down, I didn't want to put anybody else through that. And then it's just like there's a lot of blackmail that he kind of felt like he could use against me that I didn't realize wasn't blackmail. It was more proof of his issues.
Guilt. Yeah.
Yes. So in my mind, I'm like, if this just goes away, I'll just be a good person forever. You know, I'll just change my life after this.
Crazy.
They're not stupid. Like, that's the other thing too, and I think that that's why there's so many vulnerable, susceptible young people out there, because these are sociopaths. These are people who can read people. These are people who are charismatic when they need to be. These are people who are convincing when they need to be. You know what I'm saying?
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah, like as you're telling the story about who this man is, like he knew who to target, because here you have this independent, like you gave yourself
to target.
Well, you I don't want to say you gave yourself away when you
No,
when you flexed in that way. He was like, oh, because he knows this is a person who's probably pushed her family away to some degree. You know what I mean? I'm independent. I can do this on my own. Like just by and then you were a challenge on top of it. Like right. So now his little sociopathic, radar is up, like, oh, I'm gonna get this one. And then it's like, okay, well, she's independent. She's out here on her own. She made that very clear when she, like, I got this. They're looking for certain things. What do you think it is? I don't want to say like, what are they looking for? But, when you speak to young women now, because I'm sure, I know that you do that. I know you're an advocate. I know that you're out here, diligently, trying to stop trafficking, one body at a time. What do you tell young, what do you look for? Like if you're in a situation and you're talking to a group, what are some of the things, that might set off your red flag? Like, oh, this could happen. I know it can happen to anybody, but are there things,
So what I do when I do my talks, I kind of tailor it to each age group, because I've been super, super blessed, lucky lately that I've been able to speak to elementary, middle, high school. I have college. I've spoke to some police, and now I have a sheriff's department next. Like I've spoken to churches. Whenever I go and somebody wants me to speak to them, there's general knowledge, but okay, like in a hospital, there's also different things that you would look for. So when I talk to young girls, and I also like love to include young boys in this because it's not just young girls.
Yep.
And the age group for boys to be taken is anywhere between young as 3 all the way up to 14. So, and that's a big stereotype that I really I wish would just go away, that it's only young women. Yeah. It's like the younger they are, it's younger men. The older they are, it's women. So when I start at the elementary level, I start with internet safety. I start with accountability within friends. because the friends would be the first one to notice when somebody's different. Oh, you know, Jessica's got a new job. She's got extra money all of a sudden. Her outfits are changing. You know, she's got a new cell phone that nobody really knows about. She's got an overprotective boyfriend that nobody's talking about, you know. And like, I say elementary, but you know, the older boyfriend's more towards middle school and high school. So then in middle school, it's like everybody's changing, kind of getting to know who they are and their own identity. So then I talk to them more about internet baiting. And those will be like the little pop-ups that come up, you know, hey.
Or the DMs.
Or the job offers, like that one moves a little bit more into high school, the job offers that they just never come back from, or that they're groomed. Or
Well, it's crazy that you say that, because the last Super Bowl that was here, I got a DM, or I got an email, and it was for a party that they were supposedly paying girls $10,000 or $15,000. All you have to do is come. We'll provide you with a bath, you know, when you get here. And I remember reading it. I was literally on the air, and I was like, "Oh, they sent this to the wrong one," because as soon as I read it, but I put myself in into a 20-year-old, 16-year-old, 18-year-old headspace. You know,
it's enticing.
The girls that I've seen when I walk tables on Miami Beach, you know, 15, 20 grand. And in their minds, they're thinking video shoot, right? In their minds, they're thinking, oh, this happens in Miami all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, and I'm looking at this like, wait, what company is, you know, obviously reading it, and I screenshot it and I posted it in my Insta story, like, hey, just be on the lookout for things like this. And we mentioned it on the air. But it was so scary to me, because I was like, you know, to your point, they have so much access to people now. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many different ways to target young people. And I'm glad that you brought up the point about young boys, because we have that same issue with sexual abuse. You know, people always focus on young women.
Which makes it harder for men or boys to come out
and
talk about it.
1 in 6 boys will be sexually assaulted by the time they're 18, or 1 in 4, whatever. That's the general, you know, statistic that they put out there. And I believe it's 1 in 4 for young women. But there's so many young men, and especially when you're talking about the LGBTQIA plus community, you know, transient youth, homeless youth,
which are very high-risk areas, because they feel almost like somebody doesn't necessarily understand them or believe them, so they'll actually appeal to that nature where somebody feels ostracized and tell them, oh, I welcome you, I feel that way. You know, single-parent households, low poverty, that's kind of how they get your trust first. And that's usually like the middle school and high school age. But I tell, like, when I go to elementary schools, they don't allow me to say sex trafficking, which is okay. That's a very weighted word for the kids to understand. But I talk a lot about online predators, because and then bait boxes. So bait boxes will pop up, and it'll be the internet chat, and it'll be like, hey, look at this, you know, look at this Pokemon I just caught. And the kid's like, oh, cool. And they go click on it. Now they've got your address. They have access to your computer, you know. And I tell the kids, I'm like, you decide, you know, that this is your friend. Now you make them your friend, and they say, let's meet at the park. And then that's it. You know, hey, Mom, I'm going to the park, 7, 8 years old. Usually that's an age it's okay, I guess, to go outside. They go outside, and these predators are waiting right up the block. And then they're child ages, you know, so that's easily just the snatch, grab, and go. So I really talk to them about trusting who they're talking to, not giving out any information, not giving out their address. Hey, you know, I want to send you this really cool package, you know, and it looks like it'll pop up from a company. So I tell them, I'm like, don't push those things. You know, when you see those things, what do you do? And they're so adorable at that age. They all raise their hand. They're like, go tell an adult. And you hope that they keep that, you know, in that moment of temptation. Like, okay, there might be a bad guy behind it. Because when I ask them, what do a bad guy look like? And they all say the same thing. Tall, dark, and scary. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, no, you know, it can come in the form of somebody that wants you. Or like, this was a real problem where they were baiting kids and saying, I'll send you $5 if you send me a picture. But don't tell your mom and dad. Don't tell your mom and dad, and I'll pay you double. So now these kids are sending their pictures back and forth, establishing that communication, that access to their computer. Now they have pictures of the children that now guess where they're going. They're going to child porn world, and it could be a regular picture, but now they're using those pictures, using those things. And I tell kids all the time, what goes out on the internet,
you can't ever get back.
Can't ever get back. So, you know, like, you can see it kind of click with them a little bit when you speak on that level. And I hope that that carries over to when they're older and they hear somebody that offers them a job and they're like, they told me about a predator, so they may not know anything about sex trafficking, but if I can get to them there,
Yeah.
I might be able to prevent them from being in that tragedy or issue because now their minds are open to something that wasn't before.
Yeah. I just did a career day recently. I did a couple, but for elementary schools. They're different. They're different now. Like 9, 10 years old. They are wide open. They're inquisitive. They're aware. But I'm so happy to know that you're gaining access to them and at least being able to kind of plant the seeds of awareness that these things are happening, because they are very much in their phones and they are very much thinking they are 9 going on 19. And
my kids don't have cell phones. They're 13 and 15. Not at all. Do you want to talk on the phone with your friends? I have a house phone. Do you want to play games? I have a computer. And they don't go anywhere without somebody I would trust, a family member, a friend, or somebody I know, and they have cell phones. What do you need a cell phone for? So, it's a parental choice. It's something that, and even if you do, educating your kids, like being the parents, it's also like, so I'll go to the school and I'll talk to the kids, but then like I'll put out like, okay, let's have a sit down with parents as well. I'll encourage parents to come to this because that needs to be that back and forth. Like some parents aren't aware of what's on the other side of their kid's computer screen. And I'm like, you have no idea that there's a whole dark world out there behind that screen that they're staring at all day, whether it be their phone or their computer at home. This is where they're getting to them now.
Yep.
They're not necessarily doing it all just snatch and grab. No, they're
gaming with them. Like that happened to one of my hairdressers. Her daughter, beautiful girl, was playing some like fashion game or something on her phone, and you can interact, or like a rock. I don't know what it was, but it was one of those games where it's kind of like, not alternate reality, but like you have an avatar and you're in the game and whatever. And sure enough, she started communicating with somebody, and I don't know why, but the mother just thought it was odd, right? Because I don't know if they started texting, and come to find out it was a whole grown ass man. And she went and told like the father, and they took the phone away. And the girl is probably, I think she was 12 or 13 at the time, ended up using a friend's phone to continue couldn't wrap her brain around why her mother was so, and when you're at that age, you're pushing boundaries and you're doing these things. And I don't know what he was saying. I don't think that it was necessarily overtly, sexual in nature. She just felt like he's just a friend or like whatever. And the mom is like, he's a predator. What are you not understanding about this? And they took the phone, and she found a friend's phone, and she found out, that now she's texting from the friend's phone, because now the friend's mother is like, who is this person texting my daughter? So it's so scary, because there's these places where you feel like your child should be safe, or your child feels like they should be safe, and people that have nefarious intentions will maximize any opportunity, right? Like,
yeah.
So I also try really hard to kind of like clear that up. And when I do the elementary, middle school, I'm like, listen, sometimes you may or may not agree with what your parents say, because then there's a lot of sneaking out.
Yep.
And then, like, when I worked in nightclubs, so many girls that snuck out of their house to go to the club and use a fake ID are some of the very same ones that I'm picking up off the floor that are completely blacked out. So, definitely in high school, I paint the picture for them 100%. But in elementary and middle, I start telling them, hey, maybe sometimes mommy and daddy know something that you don't. Maybe if you don't understand, you talk to them. So maybe by middle school, it kind of builds a little bit more of that trust with them, because they, like, when you get upset and you sneak out, that's when things happen,
Well, yeah, and then nobody knows where you are. Nobody knows who you were with or the last place that you might have been seen. What do you think what's the most frustrating misconception about human trafficking, sex trafficking that you come across, that you really wish that if you could dispel one myth about this, what is that?
Just one?
Oh, there's a lot. Give me as many as you want, but like the one thing that when you hear it, you're just like, oh.
That you wanted it, that you chose that, and that it only happens to poor people. Those two things, or that it only happens to girls. Those three things, because then you're doing a disjustice to these young men, who don't understand what the potential risks are. Or even as a future parent, they'll come to my seminars and they'll only bring their daughter. And I'm like, okay, so your son doesn't need to know this. So when then he has kids, he doesn't know what to look for. Or your son doesn't need to know this. So God forbid he doesn't grow up to think that that kind of job is okay. He doesn't understand what really women go through. You know, so by leaving their sons at home, assuming it only happens to women, they actually put them more at risk. Because now these young men don't know the warning signs. They don't know what to look for. And then they can't help their friend either. You know, so I tell the kids when they're in the seminars, I'm like, I'm now charging you, you know, the protector of your best friend. Because like I said, they're the ones that see the behavior change first. And then a parent brought up, they were like, okay, so what can we do to dispel the snitches get stitches? So because when a friend wants to tell on another friend, they may or may not, because it's not cool. She's got some new clothes and extra money. Why are you telling on me? That's not cool. But they have to understand, boys, girls, everybody, so that they can look at each other and notice these signs and notice these things that are changing in their lives. But if they're not sitting in on the seminars, they're not benefiting from it.
Yeah.
You know, and the same thing for the poor versus rich. Like, so the rich kids don't get these seminars. They don't know what to look for. And like, I don't want to say they're more at a risk, but they're just right there equal with it. They're no lesser risk because they have more money. So you're really just putting them more at risk by not giving them the information they need that could save their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the only difference between the financial thing is, you know, people who are wealthier might have kids that are wealthier, might have harder access or different access than, you know, kids who are probably more in a poverty-stricken area or something like that, because they typically would be out at the park playing, you know, unsupervised, you know, single mom, single dad, whatever. The kids, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, access to the kids has got to be different. But I think, you know, I'm just as worried about my daughter as I would be about, you know, anybody's daughter.
But I want to ask, like,
I mean, I see kids walking to school at 4 years old, 5 years old, right here on Sterling Road, walking down 40th Avenue. And I'm thinking to myself, I would never let my kid walk to school by themselves.
Okay, but and then here's another thing. Like, so it's not just the access to, because I'm a bodyguard. I was a bodyguard for a 16-year-old girl who hated the fact that she had a bodyguard. Do you know how many times this little girl...
He gave you the slip.
Oh, my goodness. That was the most stressful contract ever. But it was like, and one time she went out of the country with just her group of friends, and like the mom in me was dying. I was like, please be careful. Do this. Take money and put it in your pocket, so if they try to, you know, run up on you, you can give them money. Maybe they won't steal your purse. Leave your passport in your room, so if they steal your purse, they won't steal it. Oh, we'll be fine. You know, so she believes, because she's got this amount of security, that nothing will happen to her. And then she doesn't stick to what the rich parents put the security in place for her, because she doesn't understand the risks that are out there. You know, so the amount of money doesn't necessarily matter, you know, if the child doesn't understand.
Yeah. And they don't understand.
For sure. Well,
especially from their parents.
I was just about to ask you, what is the likelihood, or what do you think the percentages are, of people being trafficked, people being taken by a stranger versus somebody that they know or have been introduced to? I think that, because I feel like, to me, that's also another big misconception. Like, in our minds, it's always a Lifetime movie, right? It's the girl walking home that the van rolls up on the side of her and snatches her and pulls her in, and the next thing you know, she's, you know, in Texas, and then she's on a boat somewhere and whatever, and oh my God, she's gone. And, you know, when Kendra tells her story, it's this dude who I had met, who then indirectly sends me, you know, and makes me feel comfortable. Like, how often do you think that's the situation versus, you know, again, that Hollywood kind of vision that so many of us have of what it is?
Well, so those numbers and percentages get skewed because of domestic violence.
Yeah.
So like a domestic violence situation could be the parents who are beating the kids. And then now DCF is involved, but they don't understand that the parent is also selling the kid. So that's a version of sex trafficking. Or the kid is sold off to somebody else, but nobody really knows that because those are the parents. or the Romeo pimps that are the boyfriends
Yep.
that will, be with them, and then, over time passes, then all of a sudden they've turned to violence. So now to groom them into respecting or understanding what it is they want them to do. And so now maybe they have, they've called the cops, but it's labeled under domestic violence. Now all of a sudden he doesn't want to work anymore. He wants you to go make the money. Now
Yep.
it's moved from domestic violence to sex trafficking. But there's not the due diligence again from the cops that really investigate these cases. And then like the DCF cases or child abuse cases are so overwhelming, they're so understaffed that these children aren't getting the help that they need. And then okay, so if it was sex trafficking, that's a whole different division, but they're lost under these domestic violence cases that we can't even get them the actual help they need. Instead of just monitoring, okay, they're not bruised anymore, but they're still getting raped every Wednesday by the uncle who pays the parents, because it's that kind of world out there when you dig deep enough. But the domestic, the caseworker, the social worker is so swamped, all she can do is verify he doesn't have bruises anymore and there's food in the fridge. So more stuff.
Well, and then that child, what are the chances that that child that has now lived this life of abuse grows up and ends up, or, gets older and ends up working in sex work or being trafficked as an adult because they've now kind of become used to this cycle of abuse and ownership and buying and selling, and they've become a commodity. Do you know what I mean? I think that that's the other thing too, as we talk about sex work now, I think a little bit more in the mainstream. I think we're getting better. I think people have had this kind of vision of, strip clubs and pimps and Bishop Magic Don Juan, and I don't want to say there's a glorification to it, but we assume that all of these women make the choice to be in these situations, right? Willingly and knowingly. And when you hear a story like Kendra's, or I'm sure other stories that you've heard, back to the Stockholm Syndrome, back to the abuse that's happening there, like, is it really a willingly and knowingly situation, or is it fight or flight? Is it, I'm going to live to survive this shit, so sure, be my pimp, so sure, sell me to that person. Now you're fighting for your life. Like, do you know what I'm saying? And I feel like that's a stigma that we're up against when we talk about sex trafficking. You start to bring in sex work or people on the lower end of the, financial scale, and poverty and things of that nature. It starts to get clouded, right? It's very clear cut. Again, when we're watching Taken and we see the rich girls in Paris, that go to a party with that nice looking French boy who ends up drugging them and taking, again, that Hollywood kind of depiction of what it is. And then we have this happening every single day in this very, at places I'm sure I've been to, that you've been to. I can rattle off a dozen strip clubs right now that I know trafficking is happening 24 hours. If the club is open 24 hours a day, trafficking is happening in there 24 hours a day, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I can also think about the word Stockholm Syndrome has now been changed to trauma bonding.
Okay.
Which I absolutely hate. I think it's the most horrible word in the world. But and I'm really hesitant to speak on the sex work conversation because ultimately I'm about freedom.
Yeah.
I'm about whatever your decisions are to do with your life, you are in full right. Whether I agree with them or not, I never want to take anybody's liberties away from them. So I get asked this question quite a lot about sex work, and I don't really put my opinion out there because at the end of the day, how I feel is, okay, if that's what you want to do, fine. But who grows up and says that they want to perform oral sex for the rest of their life?
Yeah.
Who grows up and says that they want to spend one day with 50 men on top of them? And if that's the thing, where's their support group to tell them that they can be more, or that they can do more, or be more, or that's not, their future, or, that they're capable of doing so many other things in life. So I get a lot of backlash when I say that too, because somebody's like, well, if they're live in poverty and their pimp is nice to them, and I'm like, it's just I'm like, really?
Have you ever been in this situation?
But no, I'll agree. There are some pimps that are not guerrilla pimps. They are nice to the women. They feel, but again, it's still grooming.
Well, I was gonna say there's multiple. What is that? There's more than one way to skin a cat, right?
Yeah,
is that what
that's what I feel. I'm like, at the end of the day, it's still you're still a pimp, and it's still promoting this woman to go do sex work and she's giving you her money. Like, in what context is this good for us, the world, her?
And can she walk away at any time? Like,
Yeah, but
And
you know,
sometimes
I
she
mean,
can, but that doesn't even. That's still not a good thing.
but yeah,
you know?
but you asked, but with what? Like, how do you walk away if you have given everything you've made to somebody else and they're like, sure, walk away. Like, do I have a 401k? Like,
Some of them like to play a mental game where they feel like that door is open for them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, some of them aren't gorilla pimps. Some of them will be like, I'll make my money wherever I get it. That doesn't mean it's okay.
yeah. I just also feel like, well, I mean, but again, it's no different than somebody who knowingly sells into, human for employment, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then is completely mistreated or is not like, we hear about what happens in the fishing industry again in Southeast Asia, and it's wild. Like, if you all of a sudden want off this boat and they're not ready to go back to shore, they will shoot you and drop your happy ass in the ocean right there, and no one will be the wiser. It's like you do what you have to do. Again, I think it's so circumstantial and not knowing how people get to that point in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's drugs involved, if there's alcohol involved, if there's violence involved, like, when you start to put all of those things into play, it's like, how much of a personal decision is this individual making on behalf of themselves? Do you know what I mean? If we're factoring in all of these other things, and at the end of the day, does it matter if they're being abused, if they're being mishandled? Like, I mean, that I think is just the most frustrating thing about this question, because I do feel like you have this huge kind of this area of muddied water that makes it very difficult for people who live I don't want to call it a more privileged life, but for people who don't have to put themselves in those shoes.
It's very muddied. And how do you feel about OnlyFans? See, now we've talked about OnlyFans on the show. I'm just saying as an outlet, it allows women who've been in this industry to take back their own power.
Yeah.
But it's, and this is totally, I don't want to take in the wrong way. We have, our company sells men's testosterone boosters. So we have women that, we, pay to walk around in skimpy outfits at events. And,
You have
and
promo girls.
Yeah, we have promo girls. And it's like, this conversation really makes me feel like, at what level does this become
Seedy?
Yeah, seedy or
Gateway?
I mean, because we do the same thing. We ask, we hit up girls on Instagram, hey, you want to work and $200 for a couple hours.
Yeah.
And it's like it's almost the same thing. It's almost the same. I'm just saying in an exploiting women type of
Okay, so
thing.
I actually
Kendra's like, oh shit, where am I? What is happening?
No,
right now?
I'm just
No, what I'm saying is, it's like, especially working security, when people find out, the things, that I've been through, they're very overly cautious around me. And I don't like that either. And I worked for years full-time modeling. I did a bunch of videos, and like, I'll still post my pictures from time to time. And then somebody will write on, oh, well, you were sex trafficked. How dare you post a picture like that? I'm like, so I can't be sexy? I can't be sexy because somebody did something horrible to me? Like, there has to be, like you said, there's a line that moves between disrespect of a woman's image and sex trafficking and promo girls and this and that. Like, there's different levels. And what's funny is, I laughed earlier because you said OnlyFans. So I think it was last year, OnlyFans wanted to turn to a normal platform. So they started trying to,
that was a joke.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen.
Well, their people all rebelled.
Yeah.
There was an uprising.
Yeah, so they took a friend of mine. You remember Hector from the Spanish Guy in like all the movies?
Yeah, I think. What's his name?
Hector. His name's Noel G.
I have to look. Sorry to anybody that's watching this right now. Noel G. Okay.
So he goes by Hector in like all of the movies. They used him.
Oh yeah,
That guy.
I don't have my glasses.
he always plays an essay or a vato or
And his name's always Hector.
it's always Hector. But yeah,
So they started with him, and he's a reborn Christian, and so his platform is this very standard of clean and this. So I'm pretty sure that was one of the reasons why they asked him. So he reached out to me and he's like, hey, would you be considered doing this? And I was like, no, Absolutely not. No way, no shape, no form. And he's like, oh, but they want to take it on the straight and narrow. Maybe you could do some fitness, some self-defense stuff. And I said, as long as it carries that name and that connotation, when with me, with my movement and my advocacy, it's just not going to happen. Like, there's some things that just, to me, are a little bit much.
2 takeaways. What I hope that we can start to do from this point forward is teach young women how to discern between a legitimate business opportunity, right? And somebody with nefarious intent, right? Like, and that to me, so there's nothing, like Kendra said, like, this is an industry. Like, modeling, we should be able to feel
Sex
empowered to
sells.
use.
That's
we
it's
should
in
be able
every-
to own it. Like, that's ours.
Yeah.
That's your choice. And again, shout out to the Naked Hustle, because I know plenty of boss women who work in clubs who have more real estate than half the dudes that are going in there throwing their entire, checking them. So that has nothing to do with it. I think I was looking at it from the perspective of when it is a trafficking situation, it muddies the water because people automatically want to dilute what happened to the individual because of their choices as far as employment goes. And then you have those other situations where there's a lot of mitigating circumstances that have led to this happening, right? Like, and again, when you're involving drugs and alcohol, how much of a decision is this person making on their own behalf to participate in these, in these activities? If you've got to stick a needle in somebody's arm in order for them to do the work you're saying they claim to love, like, maybe it's not their choice, guys. I don't know, right? But if somebody is choosing to be an escort, like if this is the life that this person has chosen because, hey, listen, I'm putting myself through med school or whatever the case may be, or I have real estate dreams. We have a friend who does only, and this is not a here to shade that, but it's teaching men and women to be able to discern between what is real and what could be ulterior motives, right?
It runs really strong, though, because when my trafficker actually got arrested for doing something else, listen to this. So 15 years passes, and I believe I'm away from him. I've escaped the situation. I've been living in Miami. I've set up my life. I got a great security system. And he gets arrested for trafficking someone from PTs. I was like, PTs? I've been to PTs a couple times. PTs is right there. When I left, he was in South Carolina. So
he made his way.
Yeah, he made his way all the way back, and then my sense of security was just completely gone.
Oh my God. What would you have done if you had run into him? Have you seen him since?
No.
Is that when you started really like upping the level of self? Because I mean, if you're listening or watching right now, like Kendra's a beast. Like her level, like your self-defense game is next. I mean, obviously you're in security now, so you better be able to defend somebody. But I mean, you started to take it extremely seriously.
Well, so I mean, I've always been this kind of individual. My father was in the Marine Corps, and then I had 2 older brothers, so I was very rough. I started boxing very early, so I was always, and that's why I guess I was so loudly confident, because I thought I knew. I thought I knew it all. And then I had kind of put this so far out of my mind. I went to counseling literally to get this off of my mind. But when I realized he was, taken from PTs or taking a girl from PTs, I literally lost all sense of security. And that's when I started to, and I was always, a shooter, but I moved into more tactical and more, things that would actually protect me, and then started doing like situational training. And so when I started doing situational training, I actually had like a little breakthrough moment where it was a re-trigger to go through that situation, but a big healing moment. And like before this, I had been doing, like for Agape, I've been doing volunteer work and, kind of helping out, but never really sharing my story with anybody. My re-triggering moment, which how I found out he had taken a girl from PTs, because again, I had put this all out of my mind, was I was watching Netflix and I'm folding clothes, and when you've been through something, you tend to watch it, or when you like something, you tend to watch kind of all those things in the category. Like, so Netflix suggested a movie to me. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I don't remember. And I'm watching it, and the first couple of minutes, they said my trafficker's name. And I was like, I'm tripping. It's probably, just coincidence. So I watch it, and like 3/4 of the movie in, they showed this necklace that I mentioned that he thought I stole.
Yeah.
And it was a custom piece. So like I paused it, and like it was like reality's like kind of cracking, and I'm like, oh shit, like is this really what I think it is? And then I pressed play, and his face came on, and it was just like literally probably where everything cracked for me mentally. Like it took me a week to watch it. I let out the most horror movie scream. And it was just like, it was really shocking. Everything I thought I was safe, I was away, I was safe, secure in my own little world with my security system. And then it was like that night was when I was like just searching everything that he had been, everywhere he had been, reading about his court case, and then
So it was like a true crime thing? Is that how this show ended up on Netflix?
It was a documentary.
Okay.
And then
holy shit.
Yeah. And then so that's when I went online and I started looking up everything, and that's when I found out that he was arrested and in prison, but he had been arrested in PTs. So that's when I didn't feel safe. Even though you're in prison, apparently there's some things that I missed in my security, in my safety, that I thought I was good, but I'm really not. So let me dedicate a little bit more time to that.
And then you just moved into the range.
Yeah, but I didn't really share my story. It took me a couple years. I came across this documentary company that had already made one movie about sex trafficking. It's called Stopping Traffic.
Okay.
And their documentary actually opens with a man speaking about his experience.
Oh, wow.
And it came out quite a while ago. So when they went to Netflix with it, it was before Epstein, and they were like, no, this is just entirely too much. So they were still, they were actually verified. They only had like 13,000 followers. So like I'm looking through, and like there's so many celebrities endorsing their movie, and like they're Jane Monks, the film directors are Jane Monks, and they're sharing this story, and I'm like, this is great what they're doing. And then they put up that they were looking to make a second documentary about survivors, and it was just kind of like that little subconscious nudge, like, yeah, you volunteered all these places, but you're not doing enough, like. And then I felt like the timing of everything, like I was supposed to see the documentary to kind of push me a little bit further. And then finding them was kind of like, but I'm telling you, the process, we've been making this movie for over 2 years. Like,
is it just because it's taken some, because I know that there were multiple times in the film, again, if you haven't seen it, please watch it. It's called Surviving Sex Trafficking. I think I got it on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, I purchased it, so I have it in my little arsenal there. And then they recommend a ton of other. I'm also the same way. I end up down the rabbit hole. So I think I might have watched like 20 of them. I watched the one on like, the gorilla dudes that go around the world and like snatch people out of, like they save people. And they were really dope. But like they have zero backing, like no help. They're kind of like out there. They're like just they're former, Navy SEALs.
Out of the country?
Yeah.
But see, that's the thing. I have so many friends that do that, but here there's so much red tape. I don't even want to bother with it.
And that's what they say in the document. They're like, we can't do it in our own country, but we can go to the Dominican Republic, we can go to Haiti, we can go to places in Central and South America, we can go and we team up with people on the ground there, and we're tactical forces, we're trained for this. We don't really have any license to do it, so if we get caught, we could be completely screwed. But they're willing to risk it, and they save people. But the most heartbreaking part about it is, for every one kid that we get out, there's 100 others that are still,
and they're just a commodity. They just replace them. The key is to get the trafficker off the street, not just save people. And that's why it's so hard. And this is another reason why I started the nonprofit, was because nobody's really doing much of that as far as like the rescue work, because there's so much red tape, so many hoops you have to jump, so many partnerships and relationships that you have to establish, so many rules you have to abide by. And I'm like, okay, just tell me what they are so I can follow them to the T. Because like everybody, and when they write me to my inbox after they've seen the movie, they're like, I just want to go out and I just want to go out and rip some heads. And I'm like, okay, and then you're gonna get him to walk scot-free. This has to be done the right way, because you save one girl, he replaces her with two.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, you got away from yours, and he gets arrested 15 years later for doing the same.
And let me tell you,
shit.
I wanted to say this earlier, I forgot. He brainwashed those girls so bad, they started a petition online. They went to court. They went to the news crews to say that he was just their friend, and that he shouldn't be on any charges or arrested.
Oh, he took a page out of R. Kelly's book.
And let me tell you,
Charlie Manson.
I picked some of these girls' bodies up off the ground almost lifeless. So when I saw it, it was 10 years later, and he still had two of the same girls. And I'm like,
oh, wow.
I picked both of you up, damn near dying off of the ground. And this is what you're doing? It was mind blowing to me how strong that hole was.
But that's why, I mean, I would assume that, you know, the support after the fact, when you do get out, obviously, like when you tell your story, you know, it's so disheartening to think about the experience you had with law enforcement. And hopefully now, 15 years later, with more awareness about sex trafficking, especially here, I think in South Florida, where we know that it's a very real thing and the spotlight is on us. I would hope, you know, with having resources like yourself now, and I'm sure you've started to kind of redevelop some of those relationships, and I'm sure they hopefully defer to you when they need help or understanding of how to deal with somebody who's trying to come forward, you know, and put away a sex or a trafficker, you know. But like, how do we make more progress? Like, what does that look like to you? How can people help? How can they get involved? Like, what do we need to be aware of? Because, you know, we've mentioned it multiple times. Like, this could be happening in Lenny's neighborhood in, you know, Bougieville.
I mean, what kind of charges do they face? You know, for being a pimp.
15 years.
Yeah, really?
15 years.
That's state of Florida.
10 with good behavior. That's most states.
Oh, well, that's
Is that per
pretty
count
stout.
or like, is that like if they had multiple women, could they get multiple?
I don't know about that.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like if you had multiple people step forward.
It didn't used to be that.
No.
Yeah.
So we've made it
Yes.
a harsher punishment.
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at the glamorized pimping of the 70s,
That's what I'm saying.
That
You
was
have this
like
Bishop
that was
Magic
like you
Don
go
Juan,
in,
like-
you pay $100 and you walk out.
Oh, and
You know.
this lady, the documentary that I was telling you that I saw my trafficker on, right before his part, this lady is making the pimp cups. And she's making like bedazzled, and she's got like a little fireplace that she sets them on top of. She says she blesses them, and then certain pimps will come from all over the country just to come get cups from her. So I was really happy that Jeezy got behind the making of the documentary, because like to be able to pull that industry in and show them what sex trafficking looks like will get them, hopefully will get them to stop glorifying pimps on their songs and pimp cups, and you know, like, okay, and I get it, and then now we're at that thin line between video vixens and, you know, what glorifying or objectifying women is, like, on which side are we doing that on the music videos. But if you change, you know, just certain things, like certain behaviors or certain words, then it changes that view of it.
Well, we're finding out now. I recently posted a story about a former vixen who was sexually assaulted multiple times on set by, you know, very powerful people in the industry. And, you know, when you're in entertainment, part of entertainment is drinking, part of entertainment is
And that's
drugs.
your career.
And, you know, and the next thing you know, you find yourself in a situation that you're completely out of control, you know, and like
And
you
that's-
said,
that's
it's your career. It's how you make your
If you
money. And
say
this is a
something,
person who
nobody else wants to hire
Yep.
you. And then, like, that's why we're seeing a lot of that in Hollywood now coming out after so long. And I tell people, I'm like, that money runs so deep. When it comes to sex trafficking and child trafficking, that money runs so deep into Hollywood, into, like, that's a whole nother alleyway that you could just go down for days and days. And I'm sorry. It doesn't matter whether you know, did the action or touched the money. You're still guilty to me.
I think one of the main things to curbing this and within our power is what Kendra's doing, which is, you know, teaching the awareness.
Yeah.
It's really teaching our kids as they grow up to be more aware of these situations and not putting themselves into it.
And also being better friends. Like, and I hate to say that, and I hate to bring it back to it, but I constantly look at situations, and because I'm a female, I'm always looking at women, because I know that I have, by the grace of God, gotten myself out of some crazy ass situations, or not had things go left when they could have gone very, very far. I just don't know. I feel like it's gotten worse. I feel like there's this, and I don't know, again, if it's a false sense of security because we think we can communicate more effectively,
Well, I
but
think
it's like
we're
your phone.
seeing too much of it
But
too.
no, but I'm just saying, like, your phone can be thrown out a window. Like, these people aren't stupid. They know exactly what to do. Okay, she's got this kind of phone. I'm either going to leave it here. That's the first thing. If they're drugging you, I guarantee you they're looking for your phone to either turn it off, to deactivate, find my friends, to whatever. Like, these are savvy individuals, right? And I just feel like it's one of those situations, to Lenny's point. Like, I'm all for body freedom. I'm all for being able to express yourself, but I'm also for teaching accountability. Like what Len said, it's like, as a woman, like, I hold myself accountable when I walk into situations to try to be as aware as possible. Like, I was sharing stories about things that I've been through, but like, you know, being on Bourbon Street, like not drinking, having somebody in the crew that decides, you know, before the night even sets out, I will be the sober Betty of the group, right? Like, somebody's going to keep an eye on everybody, and you alternate. It doesn't have to be the same person, or maybe you're lucky enough to have somebody in your crew that doesn't like drinking, right? And then it's like, you're sober Betty all the time. Yeah. You know, it's like, just because we have Uber now, and even with Uber, how many stories are we going to hear about girls getting into cars that are not their Uber and ending up in a ravine or in an alley or dead or whatever? Like, a young woman, it happened to her in Fort Lauderdale during spring break, got into the wrong Uber, ended up getting raped. Yeah. And then he like dropped her off at her hotel. Like, what? That's so... But again, where were your friends? I know you're not here. You did not come to Fort Lauderdale by yourself. Where were they? How did you... I don't understand that. That's not fathomable to me. Mm-hmm. So how do we start to retrain, and reinstill, like, teamwork makes the dream. It's the buddy system. We're back in kindergarten, guys. If you need to go to the bathroom, take a buddy.
Yeah, and there's apps that you can be on, you know, you can share it with somebody, and it's like, I'm a big person like this. Like, even when I've been through what I've been through, I don't like being tracked. Mm-hmm. I don't like that. It bothers me for some reason. I just don't like to have to give somebody my location all the time. But I do have that one friend, you know, that, you know, has no... like, I'm not gonna be checking your location all the time. So I have that one friend, and I get that a lot from other kids too. I don't want nobody tracking me. I'm like, pick that one friend that you're not dating, that you don't hang out with all the time, that's not gonna gossip about you. That one family member, it could be a cousin, just somebody to share your location with, at least one person. You know, and there's little types of jewelry now that you can wear that, you know, can keep tracking on you in case your phone gets taken away. There's, you know, just like when you get in an Uber, putting your location, Uber has it now where you can share your location with somebody while you're in the ride. It'll tell you when the ride's over. Things like what you were talking about when you're on the phone saying, yeah, hey, hun, can you come outside and help me with my bags? You know?
They think that there's somebody waiting for you that's expecting you. The other thing, and it's scary because everything we talk about, you know, people create things usually to try to change for the good, right? We've talked about this with like Facebook, right? They did it for altruistic reasons. They wanted to spread happiness, right? Thumbs up. And look at what happened. Like the air tags now. Did you see what happened to that family in Disney World? Where they literally, somebody dropped an air tag in one of their bags. And the daughter just happened to have her stuff on, and she got a notification, somebody's tracking you on her iPhone. And so they literally they dumped everything in the parking lot or whatever, and they must have dumped out the AirTag. But it was like, now people are doing, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, if you're a girl in the mall by yourself, or if you're walking on South Beach and somebody as simple as walking up and slipping because they're so tiny. So it's like, again, it's teaching just spatial awareness. You know, the guys in the ManTFup office are always talking about it. They're all like, I don't want to call them like alphas, but like, you know, men, they're just guys that like to sit with their back to the wall. They always want to be able to see the entrance. You know, they want to be able to see but we need to teach everybody that. You need to teach your sons that. You need to, there's a reason for it. Like my stepdad was in the military, and he was the first guy, he was naval intelligence. He was the first man that I ever saw do that.
Know where your exits are.
Yeah, every time we walked into a restaurant, he wanted to sit usually in a booth that was in a back corner where he could see everything. He wanted to be able to see the entrance and see who was coming and going. And I remember I was young, but I was like, why do you always do that? And then he finally explained it to me. And it's funny because now I usually ask, if I'm out with men, I'll be like, you want the corner seat? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you just you automatically defer to them because most, you know, men are kind of taught to be that, right? But as women, understanding that and knowing it makes me more aware, you know? And then in the wake of mass shootings and having people come on my radio show, them teaching you when you walk into a room, understanding what you can turn into a weapon. Like if something goes left, right? Like, okay, well,
anything.
We have microphone stands. Like what can I block a window with? How can I barricade a door? Like what, you know, but it's I hate to say that, but it's teaching people to think that way, and it doesn't have to take the fun out of it. I went to the movies over the holiday weekend, and for the first time I found myself, and I'm about to cry because it's just heartbreaking, but like literally sitting there going, like, somebody could walk in here Do you know what I mean? Like thinking about like the movie theater that I was at, and there was no security system.
Do you know? Well, some of them now have security in them, but you're actually in some private. I think it's just okay. I won't say the movie theater's name either. You're not allowed to bring firearms into the movie theater.
Really?
I left. They asked to search my bag, and I told them no. And they said, well, we're just trying to keep you safe. You know, if you have a firearm, you can't go in there. And I said, okay, so where's the person with a firearm? Do you have multiple firearms? Because if something comes in here and he gets taken out, now who saves me? This is my right as an American. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to come onto your establishment if those are your rules. Mm-hmm. And what you were mentioning about the air tag is crazy because just the other day, my assistant, she gets a tag. She went out to go get some food, and she gets a notification that says there's an air tag following her. And she's in her car, and she's like livid. I'm flying home from St. Louis, and she's texting me. She's going crazy. She's like, look, I don't know where it is. I don't want to go home. And I'm like, just stay where you are and call the cops. Mm-hmm. So she called the cops, and the cops ended up giving her a really hard time. Well, what are we supposed to do? Well, where is it? And she's like, I don't know, but do you see the notification? And she like drove around in circles at the restaurant she was at to show, look, it's following me. So I don't know where it is or what to do. And basically, he ended up giving her a report, and then he left. So the next day, she actually ended up going home. She lives with her boyfriend, her fiance. So, you know, she felt safe at home. But I'm like, look, you need to take the car to a mechanic. So she takes the car to the mechanic, and the mechanic gives her a hard time. Charges her money for looking for it and never finds it. And I'm like, so we still have not found it. I have yet to go over there. So now I have to go over there because she was like, it's in my car. I was like, it can't be in your car. It has to be on your mm-hmm. car or slipped into some crevice under the hood mm-hmm. or under the tire wheel. But now we got to go and search her whole car because they're like this big, like you said. And it's dangerous. It's true. But if you're not aware and somebody slips it into your bag, like you have to be aware of your circumference. If somebody comes close to me when I'm walking, I'm already at the corner of my eye looking at them, mm-hmm. you know, and as they're passing, I'm turning to face them so that I can see them passing by. They can see I see them. I can see if, you know, their hands move or mm-hmm. anything goes to touch me or place anything on me. It's like you said, there has to be this training of certain little things to be aware of your surroundings, aware of your person, aware of your safety, aware of your security, and not just of you, but of those around you as well.
Is this something we should be teaching in schools?
Yes.
Yeah. It is.
Like, do you think that self-defense should be a part of, like, PE?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think self-defense and spatial awareness and you know, I mean, these things are causing our kids to...
Well, they're in here. How can you be spatially aware if you're literally walking through life like this?
Disconnect from the real world. It's funny, there's a commercial, I saw it yesterday on TV, where this guy's just walking around, you know, and the car slams on its brakes.
Listening to music, I saw
you know,
that too,
and he's like, "What? I'm looking at my phone."
Yeah.
You know, I mean, really?
It was like a Volvo commercial, and
yeah,
they have the front, the automatic brakes. So,
it stopped by itself. You know, I mean.
So I asked kids when I went to the middle school thing. I'm like, you know, you guys are probably walking around looking at your cell phones like this. How many of you do that? Not one kid raised their hand, and I'm like,
liars,
right? I'm like, what? Like, okay. And I asked the girl, I'm like, you don't do that? She goes, no, I put it here and walk. And you know, 10 of them popped up. Yeah, that's what I do. That's what I do. I'm like, oh.
That's like my son. I don't text and drive. And he's like, got his phone up here. He's like, look, I'm looking out the windshield as I'm doing it.
No, but I just, you know, I talked to Kendra, Lenny, and we discussed it actually when we first started doing ManTFup stuff together for like the podcast. I really do want to start raising awareness. And I hate to always go back to women, but I'm always going to prioritize us, Kendra. I'm sorry. You know, and my fellas are more than welcome to come along, you know what I'm saying? Or at least encourage your partner, even if it's something that you do together, just grab your squad. But I do think that we need to start empowering ourselves. You know, and I hate to bring up Uvalde again, but to hear what some of these kids were able to do at 9 and 10 years old, like where their minds were at, right? Because this is something they've been now living with for their entire existence on this planet. Like the forward thinkingness, like one of them actually smeared blood on herself so that she could play dead. Do you know what I mean? But at 9 or 10, that would not have been a thought. You know what I mean? Like when I was 9 or 10, which is a long time ago, that would not have been the thing in my brain, right? But this is the world that we live in. So if a 9 or 10-year-old knows enough to do this, then it's time for those of us that are you know, so caught up in nostalgia, thinking about, feeling so bad for these kids and that they didn't get to experience the kind of childhood that maybe I did or that Len did, guess what? That's gone. I hate to say that, but how do we prepare ourselves? And it doesn't mean that you have to give up on, loving life and living it to the fullest, but being aware and being prepared. Like, do you get pushback from women when you suggest self-defense? I know you mentioned you get pushback when you talked about learning how to shoot.
When I teach women about self-defense, the biggest thing that I get from them is, I don't have time to go to the gym and dedicate to that. And so the self-defense seminars that I teach are very one-step procedures, are very this could save your life, and then you get away. It's literally, the company's called Avertum, and it's literally about averting the situation or, getting away. So I really stress a lot on that your mind is your most powerful tool, because with that, you're going to be able to go through your toolbox and use certain things at a certain time. Because somebody will say, oh, well, that self-defense situation is going to get me out. Like, no, it may or may not. You might have to use something else or this with that and combine it with that. So I work a lot on the mind. And then there'll be moves like, okay, if he grabs your wrist, how do you get away? And then to get away after that. I'm trying to at least break it, because I grew up doing Muay Thai, MMA, boxing. So I'm all about going to the gym and sweating it out and boxing it up with a bunch of guys. But some women are not, some women or some older individuals are not going to want to go to the gym 3 times a week, dedicate that money that, I might get hurt. But if I can give you just this that might save your life, I'm going to do that.
Yeah. What do you want to do for your daughter, Len?
She should definitely see the documentary.
Like I said, I try to keep her eyes open to this kind of stuff. And I don't know why I'm so,
vigilant about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, listen, I had your standard bullying growing up, nothing too traumatic, but my dad always said to me, if somebody, comes at you, pick up whatever's close to you and hit them in the head with it. And don't trust anybody. And if you pull up and they're robbing a 7-Eleven, put your car in reverse and drive away. That's what I was brought up on. It was just
the basics.
The basics, And like I said, I've never had any serious trauma like that happening. I had a gun put in my face one time, and the kid was like a foot away from me. But there was 40 people around, and I'm 16. I'm like, yeah, go ahead, pull the trigger. What do you think these guys are going to do to you after you pull the trigger? The typical, how are you going to get out of that situation? If he's going to kill you, he's going to kill you. But that's not what it was when I was growing up. Now there's a detachment in what a gun can actually do, because these kids are playing the games and doing this, and it's not, it's a cross between reality and, not reality.
But not easy.
It's not, but, and it makes it easier for them to pull the trigger, because they pulled it so many times in that game that it's normal, and you can't, when I was a kid, 10,000 years ago, however long it was, it just wasn't like that. And, the kid ended up getting his ass beat, because if you don't pull out a gun unless you're going to use it, and that's just that, again, that's how I was brought up. So what am I going to do with my daughter? I'm trying to educate her, and back to the education in teaching these kids diligence as young as they can be. I think taking art out of school, taking PE out of school, and those things made me more aware. Even though we're not saying, hey, watch out for this bad guy, when you're teaching art and what to look for in art, you're teaching to open your mind and open your eyes to what is around you. When you're in PE, you're around people, you're doing things, you're active, you're physical, and you're spatial. So taking just those basics out of kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, that's detrimental. Even though we don't have to teach them self-defense, I think self-defense should be an option in middle school and on, but
I love the toolbox reference that you make, Kendra, because I think young men or young women understanding your physical abilities, I don't want to call them physical limitations, but understanding when you're going to have to use your brain to also outsmart or whatever. I just think it's an invaluable tool to give to people, and especially, I'm going back to it, especially to young women, because it's not just going to be a trafficker. That could be a situation at a frat party with somebody who's not understanding that you are saying no. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
It could be a family member.
100%.
You know,
but having that ability to, even just knowing it can change how you feel about yourself if you're ever put in a threatening situation. Knowing that you have that can empower you to do something that if you didn't, you may not even attempt to, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like, knowing that I have tools in my back pocket, like I always go back to that dream that you have, when you're running from somebody, you're being chased, but you're not going anywhere. Or there's somebody trying to get you and you try to scream and you can't, right? Or you go to hit somebody and it's like you're punching through the water, right? Like, that's one of those things. Like, I've had those, and I've oftentimes wondered, like, okay, if I was in a situation, is that what would happen to me? Like, if I'm running, am I going to freeze? Or if I go to scream or yell for help, is my throat, me of all people, the loudmouth that I am, is that the moment that my voice is going to give out on me, right? Or, Yeah. But I think when you have training, or when you have some sort of kind of knowledge, like, I've put myself through this for this moment, it's different.
Yeah. So when I start the seminars, I usually open with a voice opening exercise where, because some people are very, very meek, and some people are very, naturally aggressively loud. But then sometimes, like, when we'll mix it in with the hands-on-hand stuff, you see the people who are aggressively loud normally, sometimes they'll come back a tone or two, and then it's something that you kind of got to amplify and get out of them and teach them that it's okay to use your voice and to power through it. So
you do see that then? Like, sometimes people can't verbally, or they cannot.
Yeah, and then I also teach them about verbal judo. So your voice is one thing. Your mind ultimately is what goes through this toolbox, but your voice, using your voice and getting over that fear of being loud and screaming at somebody, that they feel liberated after that. And then they're like, okay, well, what if the situation is different? And then I teach them about verbal judo and the art of kind of talking your way out of the situation. And then you can combine that with the quick things that I've taught you on how to get away, because sometimes when I go there, they're looking for the A plus B equals C roadmap to get away from something. And that's why I have to express to them, this one move may or may not going to help you. Or like ones that come from martial arts. Oh, I love that. They're like, I study martial arts. I'm like, okay, that's a sport. Will it help you? Yes, but it's not self-defense. It's not verbal judo. It's not situational awareness. It's not your main go-to. Just the same thing for people to say, I carry a gun. Like, you have to be able to have all of these things in your toolbox. You have to have empty hand techniques. I believe most people should carry a firearm for protection. So you have your firearm. You have and then here's the thing. You're not going to see the bad guy and go from zero to shoot him. You're not going to go from zero to screaming at him. And then on our side, when it comes to self-defense, you have to make sure you're doing things legally. So I also go over a lot of legalities in my classes, because people think, I was afraid for my life. Yes, but did you go through the levels of escalation? And they're like, what are levels of escalation? I'm like, you have to meet force on force. If it's not warranted at that moment, you got scared and all of a sudden you shot him.
Yeah.
Guess what? You're the one that's in trouble, because, it could be a scary guy, you know what I mean? And here's the weird part, like, if he's, about your frame, then it's a equal,
it's not necessarily seen as self-defense.
Yes.
In that
so
situation.
If you just shot him because he didn't have anything in his hand, are you able to prove that you went through those levels? Did you use your voice? Did you have your hands up to show that you did not want whatever was happening? Did you take those steps back? And it's hard to think about those things in those situations, but then, you kind of got to just train it until it becomes second nature, where you slip into it, and then your brain is able to choose through that toolbox without you thinking about it.
That's why I feel like it should be a part of curriculum, though, because I feel like it's muscle memory too. Like, showing somebody something one time is cool, right? And that's great. And I think any step you take to arm yourself in that way is incredible. But for me, like, I feel like I would need to go through that, like, to feel like I've watched pieces of your training. Like, Kendra, you can do that one time and be like, okay, I'm good now.
Oh, the
Like,
situational training?
Yeah.
So to be honest, the place is called Tactical Disneyland. West Orlando's firearm training. It's a really good place. Shout out to Philip. But like, he started me with a flashlight. Because I used to work in downtown Fort Lauderdale. I'd work at those clubs right there, Club Euro. Come out, you know, the stairs all the way down. You go through that like dark thing, and everybody parks at the
Shout out
bank.
to the Ralphs.
Right? Everything's right there at that dark parking lot across the way.
Yep.
And then, so like as bartenders, we would have to stay longer, count our money, and then we're going to the car with this bucket full of money. And I went to my car one time, and this guy was sleeping on my car door. And I was freaked out. The bouncer had walked me up, but then he left, and there's like a van here, so he didn't see the guy that's sleeping right here or the van that's right here. You know, he walked me to this point and then just walked away. And then I'm like, oh my God, there's like this creepy guy on my car. So I hit unlock, and the guy kind of moves around a little bit. And then like I go and put my stuff in the car on the other side and slam the door, and he kind of like grumbles something and then just like slides to the other side of the car, and like I'm like, I gotta get in my car. So I opened my door and kind of like jumped in and closed the door, and he wakes up like a zombie, like as if he was on drugs, and just starts beating on my car door trying to open it. And I'm freaking out, trying to call the bouncer back, dropping my phone, putting my car in reverse. He holds on to my door frame as I pull the car in reverse, so now I'm dragging him with my car. And I'm like pulling off to speed out, you know? And like that moment really stuck with me. So, you know, I shared it with, I was like, well, what happens if I'm going to my car and this happens? So like, you know, we started with like the little flashlight drill. He's like, I'm like, I don't get a weapon. I don't get a little shock knife. I don't get none of the cool stuff. He's like, flashlight, go to car. And the car's like in the dark. And we must have did this drill like 50 times. And every time I lost. Like, I was try to go this way, try to go that way, and he'd show me exactly how it didn't work, and I got so frustrated. I'm like, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like, you're not letting me win here. And he's like, because you think you can win. Just go back inside. What's the problem? You know? And like, he had done other people where they got to their car safely, so I was like even more frustrated and determined, you know? And he's like, it's because you're so cocky. You think, you know, you could just get to the car. Like, if it looks weird or scary, just go back inside. And it was like, you know, like, you know, and I didn't have a gun. I didn't have any of these things. And I just learned this huge life-saving tip, you know?
Go back inside.
And I was like, oh. You got the point. Kind of makes sense, you know? Go back inside. Call somebody. Like, if I saw him, so ultimately, when I saw him, I should have just went back.
Turned around, yeah.
Yeah.
Went back and found another bouncer.
And like, in these situations, like, I'm feeling all these things that I felt, but I was so misguided in my head. I felt like I could win it, but he kept doing it that way over and over to prove it, you know? But if your brain doesn't run through these situations and feel these situations, at least in mine, you know, like, just in there daydreaming, like, what would I do if this? Like, that's so powerful. You know, because now your brain has already formulated those ideas. It's in your subconscious. And if it needs to retrieve it during fight or flight, it's there. But if you've never thought about what would I do in this situation, you're not going to think of it in the situation. So it's important to get those lessons, no matter what it is. Empty hand, firearm training. They're actually all important. But when you start, you'll realize how much the other ones are important. People are like, how do I take on all that? Just start somewhere.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
And part of that starting somewhere, I think, is the conversations. And we need to be having them with our young people.
And creating ripple effects with them. Don't just stop at those who you love. Every time somebody tells me, hey, I really love the documentary, I watched it, I'm like, great, I appreciate that.
Did you
Share
tell
it with
anybody?
somebody else. Yeah.
Yep.
Like, let somebody else see what it is that you saw. Somebody you think doesn't know anything about this, or somebody who needs to see it, or somebody who's an influencer, so then they can share it with who, you know, they're following. Like, it has to be that ripple effect, because then if not, the word's not going to get out. Because sometimes we'll have surges. We'll have good months, you know, when like somebody key gets taken down, when Epstein got taken down, Weinstein, everything. Like, we had those really good moments in the media, and then it's drowned out by something else.
Yeah.
Something nonsense, you know, so the new challenge, or, you know, like we were gaining really good momentum, and then, you know, Will did what he did, Will Smith did what he did, and then it was like, weren't we just talking about, you know, this woman and her list of people that she didn't have to tell on? Like, that's how far that money runs, that she gets to keep a list of sexual traffickers and pedophiles and predators a secret. But no, it's okay. Let's watch this video of somebody getting slapped again.
Yeah.
So it has to be a continuous conversation, because the more it's out there, the more they have to go into hiding, and the easier it is for them to find. Like, because now everybody's looking in those dark corners, you know, and then they just run out of places.
Well, I know that they've made a big deal about, even when it comes to prostitution. Oftentimes the Johns get a slap on the wrist, and it's the prostitute that is the one that gets arrested and put in jail. Again, not knowing what the nature of the situation is. Was she there voluntarily? Is this a trafficking situation? But it's changing the stigma around the conversation and holding people responsible. If they can't make money off of it, if people stop doing it, if we change the culture, which is obviously a very big get because this has been happening since literally the beginning of time.
Yeah, what if it was legalized like it is in parts of Nevada?
And that's the big, like I said, that goes back to the conversation where everybody asked me, how do you feel about legalized sex work? And I'm like, okay, so legalized sex work really just gives these criminals an area to hide under. These girls are so groomed, they're going to sign a paper that says they're willingly. How do you tell the difference?
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough.
That's for that, the muddy waters.
We clearly have a very, very, very long way to go. Again, I think some of the most eye-opening information that I've gotten from other people that I've discussed, human trafficking in general, because it's labor, it's organs, which is real. Like, we don't think that that's real, but it's very real.
Oh, yeah.
And then obviously there's sex. And then you have drug trafficking, obviously, as well. And you can have people used as mules and things like that. So there's plenty of different avenues. We're speaking specifically, obviously, today about sex trafficking.
Because that's
and
more,
they all intertwine.
Listen,
Facts.
They do, but I think the drug trafficking originates more from out of this country, whereas a lot of this other stuff that we're talking about, the sex trafficking, that's a very down home thing. It's not being imported here. It's happening here.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it is being imported as well. I mean, you definitely.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying.
But no, I think that's the first one where we understand some of the other ones, I think, a little bit better. We would really prefer, as I think, a nation, to have blinders up when it comes to sex trafficking and owning the fact that it happens in our own backyards, to our friends, our children's friends and our children, you know what I mean? And I think that is something that I'm glad that Kendra was able to highlight. Also, when we talk about signs, I'm seeing more commercials of things to look out for. I've seen some great videos go viral on social media with 60-second, 90-second videos of kids in malls. And it's really, hey, look for these things. What are some things that the average person can look out for that could be a sign that somebody's trying to give them that they're being trafficked?
Obviously, if you have that awkward eye contact between somebody, that you feel like, were they looking at me? Were they not looking at me? Just take down the information of the car, what they were wearing, what they look like. There's a number called Text Be Free. There's also an 877 number, which I used to share all the time, but there's a lot of I'm not going to call a 1-800 number and, tell on somebody. I don't even know if that's the real situation.
Yeah.
But the number Be Free, if you text that number, all of that information, what they'll do is they'll dispatch a police officer to go as best as they can follow up on that tip. And that's the easiest way when you see something that you're not sure of. Obviously, a huge age gap where it looks like the person is kind of demanding of the other person. Sometimes it depends on your work field, but if they're asking for important documents and it doesn't come from that individual, it comes from somebody else, that could also be a warning sign. Physical signs of abuse could also be a warning sign. Them not looking, directly at anybody while they're standing there with someone else, or, while they're walking with somebody, they're looking at the ground. And then just the signs of just watch people's interactions. And again, these are just tips. So if you write everything down and you submit them and it wasn't what it is, nobody can get in trouble for anything if it's not what it wasn't. Yeah. But you could potentially save a life if it was something that you thought about. Like my assistant just started doing stuff in the sonography and ultrasound, and she had her clinicals, and she's been working with me from almost the beginning. So she is very educated on what signs are, and she has eyes wide open. So, they brought it, a father and a daughter walked in, and the daughter had those signs of, a little bit of signs of physical abuse, not, looking directly at everybody, not speaking very much. So she asked the young girl, would you like me to help you go to the bathroom? And the dad's like, no, she's fine. And the doctor was like, let her go to the restroom before we begin whatever test it was. So she walked her to the bathroom, and she asked the little girl, is everything okay? And the little girl said that she wasn't. So then DCF came, and then they actually had an incident to deal with, a situation to deal with. So it's like she never knew anything about sex trafficking before. I was her personal trainer before I started the nonprofit. She had known me for years, never knew this about me, never knew anything about sex trafficking. So when I actually told her I'm starting a nonprofit and this is why, she was floored, and she's like, my life's never been the same. So over the course of the seminars she's attended with me, the trainings I've made her go through, so she's educated, she was able to do that. And she wasn't sure if that was a situation or not, but she followed through with it with her instinct and her gut feeling and was able to provide some help for that girl. Like that can give you a sense of empowerment to help your, the person walking next to you, to the left or the right of you. We just have to care more about each other.
I was just going to say, this just goes back to the first 10 minutes of the podcast when you were talking about ending up, in a van, and how did nobody see that? And it's one of those things of us just being more accountable to each other, being more aware. And, in that moment, if you think something is wrong, being able to say, it is my business, and not staying out of it. And maybe that's how, maybe by making our young people responsible for one another, that's how we make them more responsible for themselves, right? Like if you're teaching Miranda to look out for these things, not because you're necessarily worried about it happening to her, right? Under your guys, like almost like reverse psychology, right? Like you're teaching her what to look out for in other people. It automatically makes her more aware of what's happening around her. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I don't know if that's a good tool to use, but I think having the conversations is where it starts, because the more we have the conversation, the more real it becomes to more people. The numbers are staggering. Like Kendra won't even hit me with the numbers because she feels like they're so, grossly underrepresented. I saw a number, 43 million people, are victims of human slavery, on any given day around the world. She says that's a really low ball number.
That's a very low ball.
They said every 30 seconds somebody is trafficked into sex or sex trafficked. Every 30 seconds. Again, probably a very low ball number, but that's wild. For most young girls, it's 11 to 14 is the average age. Boys, it's even younger.
Yes, for boys.
So it's like, this is heartbreaking. And when that happens, Kendra, I hate to say it, but I feel like you're probably a rarity in the sense of truly surviving it.
And then being able to stay focused for so long and not be groomed, and just kind of staying focused on what it is that I wanted, because I had lost my apartment, I lost my car, I lost any money I had saved up. So when I left, I didn't have anything to go to, but I knew that staying wasn't the option either. So, and then a lot of girls will see that and they're hopeless, and then they're like, well, I might as well just stay here. I'm getting taken, I'm getting this, and this. And then, like I said, the ones that aren't gorilla pimps that don't beat them, they're like, well, at least he doesn't hit me. And it's like, no, like you have to want more for yourself and want better for yourself. But then there's so much blackmail that's done against these women, and so much, degradation that they go through, that they feel like they don't even, I'm not valuable enough to leave. I'm not, important enough to leave.
And
like,
then if God forbid they do leave.
And run into an officer that doesn't, understand that and re-triggers them, then they close up even more and go back. Yeah. And luckily, like I said, I've been so blessed lately with the opportunities to go speak. So next month I should be able to go to Broward County Sheriff Department and go share a seminar with them on, what the signs are, what to look for, what a conversation with a survivor is like, so that they don't re-trigger them. So it's like, to me, that's going to be one of the highlights in the stuff that I've done, to go from what I went through to the cops, going all the way full circle to be able to now educate the cops on what to look out for. Like, it feels like, okay, this is what I was supposed to do. Like, the things that I went through, had a meaning and had a purpose, for however horrible they were, I'm able to give back and save so many others.
You know what we call that here? We call that manning the fuck up. That's what we call it. And that's why I said you are, I think, a textbook definition. If I asked you, what does ManTFup mean to you?
Being accountable for yourself and your growth and the security and well-being, emotional and physical, of others around you.
Boom. That's a pretty good one. I don't think we've heard that one before.
Yeah, I like it.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, because like I said, in my family, that's been a big phrase, with my son and his family, and then my dad coming from a Marine Corps family. Like, a lot of it, people will be like, oh, you tell your son to man the fuck up? Like, are you telling him not to be emotional? Are you telling him that, he needs to be what a man is supposed to be? And I'm like, no, it's getting over whatever excuses that you put in front of yourself that you can't be evolved to be your best individual that you can. It's taking whatever traumas were done against you and using it to promote more growth around you and save others around you. Like, it's being the bravest, most authentic person you can be.
And by the way, feeling your emotions, being in your emotions, and being able to own your emotions,
that vulnerability
is brave as fuck.
Hell yeah, because I'm telling you, it was definitely, like, with the premieres of this documentary, like, going through the filming process was very rough. It was very hard because I put this away for 15 years now. Like, everybody sees me as this tough chick, but they didn't know my history or how I became that way or why I became that way. So then it was even harder because now I'm like, I felt like I was coming out of a closet, you know? And, like, I'm sharing my deepest, darkest secret with the world. And so I went to the premieres, and the first one was in Houston. And I didn't know any of the people there, but watching them, like, being in the room with them while they were watching the documentary and, like, hearing them gasp at certain points and making their comments was very hard. It was very, very hard. And then we went to Hollywood and did a premiere out there, and there was over 300 people in that premiere. And that was hard. But coming to Miami and doing it with almost 200 people who knew me directly one-on-one was the hardest part. It was literally like putting all of my vulnerabilities out there and just like, I'm trusting you guys with this, and I've met some like I've seen in comments, again, like the why didn't she go or blah blah blah, how did you get there? I've seen all of those things and I've dealt with all those things, but like during the Miami premiere, some of my family members were there, which I didn't know were coming. And like some of my closest friends, and I was running around for that one. I didn't get to sit and watch it, but like as I'm running around getting everybody in, I see people coming out, and I'm like, what are you doing out here? You're missing the premiere. And they're like, I can't watch that. I can't. I've had so many people tell me, they're like, I bought it to support you, but it's going to take me a very long time to watch that, to see.
Because they love you.
Yeah. And it was hard for me, but being accepted and being able to, stand out on that forefront and say, I don't care whatever comments you guys have made, I'm secure and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's really life-changing and empowering and satisfying. Like, watching those little kids, like, was the best point, like, best thing I've ever done with my life.
Yeah.
They were singing and smart and educated, and I had them draw pictures after of what they learned, and they're, like, making skits of the stuff that I'm saying and talk about how they'll be safe. That's what life is, Like, my nonprofit represents 3 things, like prevention, education, and rescue. But the prevention is where it's if I can help you not even feel that, that's the best feeling in the world.
You're saving lives. You're saving lives. So, Kendra, listen, I know you've taken up a lot of your afternoon. You're incredible. Len, do you have any final questions or?
I think she's pretty much answered everything. I'm a strong believer in early education.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it begins. I think that's where, the battle that we're fighting at this level, it almost seems insurmountable because of the people that are involved, because of the lack of caring by the police. There's just so many things above you up here. But down here, we have these fresh little open minds that, you say something to a kid when he's 5 years old and it makes a point, he's going to remember that for the rest of his life, whether he realizes it or not.
Well, because he doesn't think you're stupid yet.
Yeah,
they absorb everything. By the time they get to be 13 and 14, they know everything, and you know nothing, Jon Snow. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And so at 5, it is important, but we're so caught up in other things that having this conversation, I feel like, can be very difficult. Like, again, we talk about red tape. Talking about sex trafficking. I know you talk about predators, so we have to find a way. We have to find the way to circumvent the system, right? Because we can't obviously go in and talk about sex trafficking because we can't say sex. We can't say certain things to small children, right? Even though if we could, it may prevent some of them from being sexually abused.
You have to use parallels. You have to use, Well,
like she said, predators. Like I love talking about it's the bad.
But I mean, with the young kids, it's really teaching them the awareness and the the spatial stuff and the their environment. If you teach them their environment at that age, when it comes time to make those hard conversations in middle school or high school, they're already you don't have to teach them to look around.
Yeah, and even if they don't hear the words sex trafficking,
Correct.
they still know what symptoms of, what characteristics of sex trafficking are. So they know that, So they may not know it's sex trafficking, but they know how to avoid that situation in general. So if you catch them while they're early and teach them that while they're growing up, they like you said, when it's time to make those important decisions, they might make the right ones because of the information they got before.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that when we know that age bracket, it's important. You know what I mean? Like when we're talking about kids under the age of 10, when we're talking about young girls that are, preteens, like the sooner the better. And sugarcoating doesn't always, work. And we've discussed it. Like just having been at those career days with these young 9 and 10-year-olds, we have to get them now, because that I used to think you could wait till like 8th grade. No, like at 8th grade, they're in college in their minds. Like it's just, it's absolutely wild. But Kendra, I appreciate the work that you're doing. Anything that we can do here at ManTFup to help with that, Kendra and I talked about putting together some self-defense classes. The radio station is yours. Like, I'm here for it. If you have, I think, questions about firearms, carrying, proper training, self-defense, please reach out to Kendra. I know you're incredible at replying to your DMs and getting back to people, especially people who are trying to protect themselves and the people that they love. So if you want to give out your social media information, definitely do that.
My nonprofit is Liberation Team US, and the self-defense company is Avertem, with a E-M at the end, AVERTEM. But most of the time I respond to my personal one, which is Hustle Queen. And I like to share a lot of the information.
Yeah.
So if they call any of those 3, they can find the other one on there.
Very cool. Well, like I said, Kendra, Geronimo, we appreciate you coming by the ManTFup podcast. Such an important conversation. Again, we are so far with so much work left to do when it comes to this issue, especially in this country, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. So continue to do what you do. Please, guys, check out Surviving Sex Trafficking. I know you can get it on Amazon Prime. I'm sure you can probably find it on, can you find it on Apple?
Yes.
So like on Apple.
It's like a Vimeo.
Yep. So it's definitely out there. And even if it takes you a minute to watch it, you know what I mean? Get it, support. And I highly encourage, watching it with your, I hate to say, but watching it with your teens, or if you're listening and you have a squad, sit down and watch it together. Have the conversations. Do your research. I know we have some incredible nonprofits here that are helping with people who have been, victims of sex trafficking, but are on their way to becoming survivors. I know Glory House Miami does a lot of incredible work. I don't know if you have any other, resources.
Glory House is a really good one.
Yeah.
There's also, we also opened up a domestic violence division part of my nonprofit. A lot of the cases that I've come across, a lot of the women that I've helped were going through domestic violence issues, and there's such a, remember I told you, such a shaky line between the two. I'm very educated on sex trafficking and their laws and the procedures and policies for that, but some of the women that I've helped, I don't know about those laws and things. So they overcame their issues, and they were super excited when I came to them and said, hey, I get a lot of women that have these issues. I don't want to send them away to a system that may or may not help them. Is there any way you can help and direct them? So they're going to be doing the same things we do: prevention work, education work. Hopefully I'll be able to take them into the schools with me to do a small section on like what healthy relationships look like.
Yeah.
What respect for yourself as an individual looks like. So the more we can create these conversations and after school cares. I've worked with like Hollandale Powell. I worked with them. I worked with Miami PD. So if there's anybody out there that knows any programs that, are looking for a speaker to come, like I'm totally open to it. I'm definitely looking to do more partnerships with after school care programs, schools, K through 12.
Love that.
Any businesses that feel like their employees need it. I recently found out that Planned Parenthood does not have a requirement to have sex trafficking seminars, which completely blew me away. I know the hospitals do, but Planned Parenthood does not. So that's another avenue that I'm looking at. Like truckers, I have a couple of trucker friends that they have to have some of those seminars. Not all companies do that, so I'm going to reach out to them. Miami-Dade College, I should be setting up a seminar there soon. So just anywhere, anybody that feels like their community could use it, I can tailor it to them.
We absolutely love that. And I think that the best way to leave this is also to go, if you're in a situation and it seems questionable or you're looking at something happening, just because it's happening at the Aventura Mall doesn't mean it's not what you think it is. Or just because it's happening at the University of Miami campus doesn't mean it isn't what you think it is.
The Aventura Mall actually has a high number of Russian sex traffic victims and human traffic victims also that work sometimes actually in the mall.
So yeah,
Makes sense.
it can happen absolutely.
Sunny Isles is full.
Yeah, anywhere. But that I think is the point of the conversation is that, you know, you can live in the nicest gated community. It doesn't make your community immune to being a place for nefarious illegal activity, and especially when it comes to sex trafficking. So, you know, see something, say something. I know we've had this conversation. Snitches do not all get stitches, people. And we have to take responsibility for our own community. And if, you know, it takes a village and all of these things. And you are your brother's keeper and you are your sister's keeper. And we have to get back to that place. Otherwise, I don't know what the future really looks like for us if we don't start looking out for each other. So, man the fuck up, folks. Man the fuck up.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
There you go. Thank you, guys. Keep it locked. We'll be back next week with another episode. Kendra, Geronimo, we appreciate you stopping by. Please like, subscribe, share, and follow. And if you have any questions or you think you may know somebody who is a victim of sex trafficking or is being sex trafficked, please, obviously reach out to your local law enforcement. But if you really need more direction, reach directly out to Kendra because she can for sure help facilitate.
LiberationTeam.org.
LiberationTeam.org. They're getting a follow right now. It's the ManTFup podcast.
Peace.